What's up, YouTube?
I got to.
Another swig of that right here.
I lead all life. This is Yata Gang. This is
It's another one of them bangers, man.
It's a
Y'all can check out the music through Daniel the Don on iTunes and all other music platforms. But let's get straight into this today. So today we are going to talk about slavery turning into mass incarceration. The title should be Slavery in 2020. So where did all this begin? Let's see. The earliest legal documentation of a shift was in 1640, where Negro John Punch was sentenced to lifetime slavery, forcing him to serve his master Hugh Gwynn for the remainder of his life for attempting to run away. And if you don't know, there used to be servitude, which means you had to pay off debts and things of that nature. But then this is where they say it really started. So after 1640, planters started to ignore the expiration of indentured contracts. So basically it really started with the white guy, because him doing away with that made other people start just doing away with it as well. And then this was demonstrated by the 1655 case Johnson versus Parker, where the court ruled that a black man, Anthony Johnson of Virginia, was granted ownership of another black man, John Casar, as a result of the civil case. So a lot of people don't know it actually was more than just white people who had slaves. There was black people who had slaves, just a lot less. Information. This is kind of talking about the integration of it turning into being white people and black slaves to predominantly black people. But this is in Barbados or whatever. And then when they started to really do away with slavery, they got into something that's convict leasing. And convict leasing was a system of penal labor practiced in the southern United States and overwhelmingly targeted African American men. Convict leasing provided prisoner labor to private parties such as plantation owners and corporations. Okay? Now let's keep on going. Now, after this is kind of when everyone knows about the 13th Amendment. But what some people don't know is there was somebody called, someone named Charles Sumner, which was a senator and a Pennsylvania representative. And what he actually wanted to put into our Constitution was it saying all persons are equal before the law, so that no person can hold another as a slave. That was originally what the 13th Amendment was supposed to be. This was written in February 8th, 1864. Now, on January 31st, 1865 was when the amendment was ratified that we have now, which states the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution abolishes slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime in Congress. So the real reason they added that, in a nutshell, is so for one, slavery wasn't written off entirely, because at that time it wouldn't have probably been accepted. They wouldn't have got the required number of votes or whatever, but till this day, it's still the same way. Meaning, if you're incarcerated, obviously, you're a slave. Now, what did that mean? What did that turn into? So did that stop the slavery and things of that nature? Not really, because if you know of let's look at this picture real quick. The Jim Crow laws. They varied by state, restricted marriage, voting, and working rights. There was a lot of laws that were starting to be instated mainly just for black people, and that's Jim Crow was basically an actor of that time who symbolized like ignorance of a black person. They tried to make us look dumb. So they started doing things, i.e. Jim Crow laws. I got a little video about that. And it wasn't only the Jim Crow laws, there was also the black codes, there was a lot of different things. But let's watch this little video about the Jim Crow laws to see what this was. Because I remember when I was in school back in the day, I used to like my class when we had little video times and stuff. When we sat down and watched videos. So I try to integrate that into these lessons that I put together. Now, if they will work for a brother. But I hope y'all can see the buildup of what I'm trying to show here. Now let's scroll back down to where that video was, and also, if y'all want to come to see this for yourself, this is on my Wakelet. The title is Slavery, and most of my videos are all on Wakelet. So if you ever need to go in reference to something, they're right there on my Wakelet. Now let's try this again. Dang, now every baby's crying in this house. Okay, Jim Crow laws. I believe this is by like a little girl. I believe this is by a little girl or something. I'm gonna let you guys watch this, and I'm gonna go try to regulate all the kids in this house real fast. I'll be right back.
Learning about Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws were laws placed in the U.S. in 1877 and ended around 1950, but these laws became most prominent in the 1930s. Oh, my bad. I didn't even explain what they were, only when they were. A Jim Crow law was a law that legally kept colored people and white people separate from each other. Often the term separate but equal was used to defend these laws, yet this was rarely the case. Though this is just one example of how these laws were unfair. Let me help you understand by doing a sort of time travel, if you will. Though this may not be a time that you boys will favor. Back in the
Sorry, I know this is boring, it's kind of childish, but it's put into a simple way so anybody could really understand it.
1930s, these Jim Crow laws affected just about every aspect of life. Colored people weren't allowed to eat, sit by, ride a train with, or even go into the same buildings as white people. The same went the other way around. Oftentimes, the white people would look down on the colored people, sometimes with pity, but most often they looked down on them in a lower-than-me way. As I said before, the quality of places meant for colored people were most often in worse condition than the places of the white people. There were biases in other areas of life too. Aside from the bias in what was considered everyday life, there was also bias with the crime system. Colored people were arrested for crimes and charged harsher than white people.
Now, remember that, and if you're making the connection with everything else, you'll understand what that means. Jim Crow laws is actually deeper than this. I believe this was just a girl doing this as a project for a school or something, but I felt like it would still be good.
There were many bad things that happened to people of color and white people who supported them. Oftentimes, punishment for this cruelty was either non-existent or not appropriate for the crime. The laws affected all of North America, but were often harsher in the South. They were harsher in the South because in the Civil War, the South fought for slavery and the North fought against it. In fact, the Civil War was the cause of the Jim Crow laws. The reason that they're even called Jim Crow laws is because there was a play where the main character was presented as a dim-witted, aka stupid, black slave. At first, it was just the name of a character.
Now understand, when we made the 13th Amendment, that put the slavery mindset through all of America because of the fact that the North and the South couldn't get along. Now, just ride with me on this one.
But it soon became a term used to insult colored people. There are many references to these laws in books and movies. One is the book The Help, which was turned into a movie of the same name. In the book/movie, it tells the story of a girl who wants to reveal the perspective of all the colored maids and how unfair the laws were to them. One great quote from the trailer for the movie is, "We love them and they love us, but they can't even use the toilets in our houses." We can go home now. But we luckily don't have these laws anymore due to...
Okay, well, she's gonna keep on going, but I'm already feeling like I'm a little bored, so I feel like y'all may be as well. So let's keep on going. Okay, now then there was a Peonage Act of 1867, which makes it illegal to be a slave of debt, but not black. And read more into that if you want to. Okay. Now the black codes, as I already spoke on, were laws governing the conduct of African Americans. Best known of them were passed from 1865 and 1866. Okay. Now understand what that means. So they're giving blacks more codes that they have to follow. Easier ways for them, giving them any reason to be able to throw them behind bars and get them in trouble just to put them back under that term slave. Now let's keep on writing. Now we're going to start writing into more of today's terms a little bit more. So, I kind of skipped forward a little bit because I didn't want to go every single year. But now to today, if you correlate it to today, so there's a big, like one of the best things to work for in a lot of prison systems would be this company called Unicor. So we're going to talk a little bit about them and see, with them being the best, that should kind of set the standard for everything else. Okay, so it seems like a good thing because it says it gives them the proper training for workplace and everything. But we all know what happens when you get out of jail. People don't, it's really hard to find employment. But the main topic of all this is, in 1977, they began this new Unicor name and everything, where they pushed it into the prison system. By 1980, the prisons began to overpopulate. So 3 years after they put this into place, the prisons started to overpopulate. Now, if you can make that connection, that's good. If not, then we can keep going. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this. This is a top prison job salary, and you see I got Obama over there throwing bread. So the rehabilitation includes payment ranging from 23 cents to $1.15 per hour. So I don't know if I put this on there. Oh, okay, it's right here. There are a variety of different aspects, blah, blah, blah. And by law, they have to put at least 50% of their earnings toward paying off their debts. Now, if you think, say you're making 23, let's say you're making $1. Let's just say you pretty up there and you're making $1. Then you're really only making 50 cents. But let's say you're making 25 cents. Then you're really only making 12 cents. Now, and then let's think about that. And while we think about how much you're making as a baller in jail, we can look at this a little bit. I don't know if y'all are able to see this on the screen or not, but a good example, a 4-pack of Charmin, $3.05. This is the pricing of things in jail. Now think about that. Think about that. So for an hour of work, basically, let's say $1.10, and that's a Sprite. Okay, that seems legit. But let's get back to this, because I just wanted to give a little reference to that. And then let's ask, is it fair? So the typical worker typically earns about 2 cents to the dollar made by the company, Unicor. Is that fair? Let's think about it. And then with that being said, how I just told you that's one of the best companies to work for. Another example is if you're in Cali, they got people working for 8 cents to 37 cents. Now think about working for that. $12 for a month? Bro. Let's keep... Now, Now, when people are saying this all, well, they shouldn't be committing the crimes. I'm also get into that too. But I wanted to just get on to you just so you can have a reaction in yourself. And there's only two ways to have a reaction to this, to be honest. But now, I threw this in there just because everyone was saying Kanye was crazy. You remember where everyone was saying, oh yeah, Kanye's saying some crazy stuff. But in 2018, he advocated for the repealing of the 13th Amendment exception for penal labor in a meeting with the president. And y'all didn't know what he was talking about because y'all was too busy saying he was crazy. He was talking about how this law was wrong, how this slavery on the law was wrong. And he said it back then, but a lot of y'all just didn't listen. And what it really was, I don't blame us, I blame the media. The media puts it off as, oh, Kanye's lost it. But let's keep going. Maybe I lost it too. Maybe I lost it too. Maybe we all lost it, whoever got a little bit of a thinking power. But let's look at this. Let's look at this here. Now, when we talk about Trump bringing all these jobs back to America, remember he said, "I'm gonna bring the jobs back to
While the
America."
rest of the U.S. may be struggling for work, there's currently a real boom of job offers for inmates in the country. But state and some of the biggest private companies are now enjoying the fruits of a cheap and readily available workforce, with tens of millions of dollars spent by private prisons to keep their jails full. Artie's Gaynor Chicken takes up the story.
Now, did you hear what she just said? Spending all that money to keep the jails full. Let's keep going on.
In the U.S., the market for cheap labor is booming, behind bars. In the last 15 years, partnership between prisons and private manufacturers has increased significantly.
The way I look at it, China uses little kids, America uses black people.
They're becoming America's very own Chinese-style manufacturing behind prison walls. Prisons, in fact, advertise themselves as such, as an alternative to outsourcing cheap labor to China or elsewhere. On the web, we came across this pitch that prisons prepared to persuade private sector companies to come and do business with them. Take a look.
There's not enough folks that will do this type of work in this country. So therefore, we're bringing back this industry that historically has been going out of this country, and we're putting it, inside the walls, and it's absolutely a perfect idea.
Let's think. Why does she say it's a perfect idea? Because nobody else wants to do it. For one, I wonder if she has any other reasons.
I have a workforce that does not have car problems or babysitting problems, etc. They're always here and they're always willing to come to work.
That's fucked up. That's messed up. I'm gonna try to stop cussing.
Prison labor. Among many other things, prisoners make
cost
clothing,
effective.
textiles,
yeah, we pay them 8
electronics,
cents.
furniture, and even solar panels.
Just as we're trying to get China to stop with their prison labor, ours is at the same time increasing.
Hundreds
That's
of companies
crazy.
have used prison labor directly
That's
or through
amazing.
subcontractors, including Microsoft, Boeing, Starbucks, Victoria's Secret, and others.
They qualify for federal tax breaks. They can get recompensated.
Now remember these companies, all these companies that come up in these videos, when we thinking about blackballing and not going to play, let me not say no more.
Up to 40% of the wages that they pay to these inmates. We as taxpayers, we have to house, feed, and provide medical care and everything for all of these inmates. We do this as taxpayers. It comes out of the tax pool. And that keeps the actual prison workforce healthy and in shape to go out and perform these jobs for these private companies.
Hard-working and reliable. Inmates show up.
Work in prison is mandatory, and the choice many inmates have is whether to work for a government-run prison industry for less than $1 an hour or a private one for a minimum.
Yeah, I was about to say there is no you have to work. They tell you have to work. Man, you tripping. If they say, oh, you have the choice.
Wage of around $6. Unicor is a government-owned corporation that uses prison labor to produce all kinds of goods, mainly for other government agencies. 175 different types of products and services. You see the variety listed on their website. They too partner up with private firms now. Last year, Unicor's revenue reached $900 million. As far
900 mil. A million. No, but did you peep what she said about they make $5. When she says that, she's not saying an hour. She's saying a day. I just want y'all to understand that.
As private prisons are concerned,
They made $900 million.
prison corporations made.
Crazy thing is, that's not the only way prisons make money. Now when you think about the money, let's really think about the money.
$3.3 billion last
And
year
you're going
alone.
to see where they make more money
Are
in,
traded
later
on
on
the
in
New York
this video.
Stock Exchange. They are for-profit companies, and the
In my video,
savings
not this
that they
video.
reap from using inmate labor go to their bottom line. It's money they otherwise don't have to spend in order to keep the facility running.
Large prison
Yep.
populations and harsh sentences result in greater profits. America's three major private prison companies spend around $45 million over the past 10 years on lobbying state and federal governments for supporting immigrant
What's 45
detention,
million when you
mandatory
make
minimum
making
sentences,
900
three strikes
million?
laws, and other legislative measures that contribute to the growth of America's gigantic prison population. The U.S. now holds more people behind bars than any other nation. More than 2 million. That's 1/4 of all prisoners in the world. From a cost-effectiveness point of view, the $45 million that private prisons have reportedly spent over the past decade lobbying to keep prisons full is peanuts compared to the billions that they make every year. One can argue about the many causes and effects of America's skyrocketing incarceration rate, but since prisons became a for-profit industry in the U.S. 30 years ago, the number of prisoners has gone up dramatically. Not to say that it was the only cause behind the spike, but many argue it was
that's
part
honest.
of it. And now with the
Honest
cheap labor
journalism-
market
journalism.
expanding behind American bars, one is wondering whether the justice system in the U.S. is adopting market values. In Washington, I'm Ganesh Shekan.
Ooh, that was a good little video, I think. Let's keep going. I paused and watched the whole thing on that. Alright. Now, what did I just say? That this ain't the only money they make? So now let's see, how much money do private prisons make? Let's click on this and see where this takes us real quick. How much money do the private prisons make? So it says guaranteed nearly $18,000 per prisoner per year. Oh my God. And I know that ain't a lot of money because, well, it don't seem like, but when you think about how many inmates there are, oh, the Bureau. Oh, here the answer is right here. Let's look. The Bureau of Prisons paid $639 million to private prisons in just 2014. Well, damn. I don't really know what more to say to that. It's a lot of money going toward prisons. Okay. Now let's see. I don't even see this joint. Some of these videos I just put on there with the good title because the truth don't
Prisons are
slip.
extending their reach beyond jail cells to make more money off incarcerated people. The number of people incarcerated is going down in the United States, but more inmates means more money, and private prisons are looking to make a profit by providing their own services with almost no oversight by the government.
The most common ways these prisons make money is by charging inmates for phone calls, contracting medical.
Now think, if they're making money off of the people working, they're making money off of selling the products, then they're making money off of the inmate making money because the inmate now has to go buy these expensive ass phone calls, has to buy all these things.
Services
Kind of
and
seems
food services,
monopolized.
transporting prisoners, and charging inmates for basic needs. Earlier, I spoke to Axios reporter Steph Kite about where this trend started and what it means for prisoners.
Well, it all started with the war on drugs when the U.S. started incarcerating
You might watch
increasing
this one,
numbers
too.
of people. And of course, the U.S. still, even with the decline over the past few years, is the most incarcerated nation in the world. And so we
Yeah.
really saw a lot of these big companies, these big prison companies, boom alongside the war on drugs. They rose along with the rising incarceration.
And smart people know the war on drugs was a racist war. It was geared toward a certain type of people. Of course, not only a certain type of people did drugs, but it was geared toward poverty-struck areas. Well, let's keep going.
Rates in the U.S. And that's where they got their money. As you said, the more people who are in prison, the more spaces are needed, the more services are needed. And while most people are aware of the for-profit prison industry, sometimes they don't realize all of the services that also create profits for companies, like, as you mentioned, phone calls for prisoners, which oftentimes are really expensive, and food services, and health care, and even just the everyday toiletries that family members or prisoners would buy from the commissaries, and that also drives a lot of profit. And of course, when you look at the companies that provide those services, that provide, clothes and toiletries and these other small items that prisoners can buy, they're not necessarily marking up those prices, but prisoners don't really make any money. And of course, you have to take a step back and recognize that not only is the prison system expensive, but it also, we jail the poor people in the U.S. overwhelmingly. The poorest people in our societies are often the ones who are ending up behind bars.
Yeah, Axios really takes a really...
And sadly, the poorest ones are a lot of our community.
Deep dive into this. You do an excellent job. Wherever there's a lot of money and wherever politics has a role in it, you get lobbyists. So can you talk a little bit about the influence of lobbyists when it comes to this sort of stuff?
Absolutely. Two of the biggest for-profit companies, GEO Group and CoreCivic, they do spend millions of dollars. Over the past few years, they've spent millions of dollars on lobbying efforts. And when I spoke to their spokespeople, they assure us that, they don't lobby to incarcerate more people, but they do lobby for things like reentry programs. And they say they do lobby to explain how their businesses work. Of course, it's interesting to look at, as we've seen this bipartisan rise in interest in reentry and reducing recidivism rates, we've also seen these big companies sort of change their offerings. They're not just offering for-profit prisons. Now they're also getting into reentry programs and ankle bracelets, things that you would use.
Now think, they first just started in the prison. Now they're expanding to the ankle bracelets, everything else. Man, they trying to take all the money. All the money.
For probation and parole. They're also becoming really large in the immigrant detention industry. Most of the immigrants in detention are being held in for-profit detention centers. So as we're seeing the fall in incarceration rates, that's not the only way that these companies make money.
In.
And there's also been a lot of pushback very, very recently
in
regards to the bail system. And you guys talk about that as well.
Yeah, the bail system is one of the first ways that the U.S. prison system ends up hurting the most impoverished in our communities. Oftentimes, people are put in jail before they've been convicted of a crime, and they stay there because they can't afford bail. Even if it's not a ton of money, if they don't have a couple extra $100 or a couple extra $1,000, then they're not able to post that bail, get out.
I like her journalism. She's really honest.
Of jail until their court date, and we're seeing over half of the people behind bars are in our jails are there because they can't afford bail, or for some other reason why they can't get out and they haven't been convicted yet. But there have been movements across the nation to end cash bail because it tends to hurt people who just don't have the cash. It's not keeping people behind bars because that they might not show up to court or that they've been charged with a serious crime. It's just because they don't have the extra cash to pay, which forces them to either turn to the bail bond system where they can pay a fee and have someone else cover their bail, or off.
Yeah, she getting deep in this. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm putting this whole video on. I just don't like people to be like, well, you cut it off and that wasn't the real point. I like for y'all to get the whole point.
Oftentimes, these people will plead guilty whether or not they are guilty because they can get out on time served or be placed on probation. And at least that way, they're not behind bars. They have a better chance of keeping their job and caring for their loved ones.
So I remember reading that shortly after President Trump was elected, there was sort of a spike for private prison companies. There was a spike on Wall Street for them, right? Their stocks went up. But we know that there have been some tweaks in the laws, right? The criminal justice reform sort of legislation that the Trump administration passed, the decriminalization of marijuana and sort of various other drugs that we're seeing a wave across the country. Is that having an impact on the number of people we incarcerate, and how
And everybody hates Trump, but I feel like a lot of people, if they took a step back and instead of just listening to what everybody say about him, start researching about him, research all these things and research what he has done, what he hasn't done. I feel like people may not totally change how they feel about him, but have a more open mind about him, because I don't know, I feel like he's done a lot for the black community while we say that he's racist.
Is this sector pushing back or at least responding to it?
Well, one of the reasons we saw stocks rise was because President Obama made some efforts to limit the use of for-profit prisons. And when President Trump came into office, he did away with the efforts that Obama was making. So that's one reason. It was kind of a removal of some of the efforts from the previous administration to curtail the use of for-profit prisons. And another impact is if you look at spending from ICE, federal spending from the Immigration and Customs Enforcement has risen pretty significantly over the past few years to these for-profit prison companies. And so the rise in immigrants who are in detention centers has also helped boost these companies. And I do think they're obviously, they are a big part of our system. And there was a sense where the government needed these companies at a certain time. They did not have the capacity to hold
at a certain time. And don't forget
the number of people that were being incarcerated in the 80s and 90s, and now they're struggling to hold the number of immigrants in detention. So there is a sense in which, sure, the government relies on these companies to provide services, but what most advocates who I've spoken to, most criminal justice reform advocates I've spoken to have said is that they just want more oversight into these companies, more regulation with these companies to ensure the safety of prisoners and migrants in their care.
All really interesting. So many things to sort of touch on when you start to talk about this topic. Steph Kite.
That's all of that. Okay. Well, that was a good little video. Now then when you think about, when you start to connect this, the bigger picture with how is this connected to racism, then I tell you that poverty is connected to incarceration. Obviously, for a long time, black people were sent to impoverished areas where a lot of families didn't move from because a lot of people made it home. Now, maybe because of that, I personally believe it's because of that blacks make up nearly 40% of the inmates in the nation's prisons, although they are only 12% of the U.S. population. Now, experts estimate that 1 in every 4 black men will spend some time behind bars. And I can click on this right here. It'll show this little image. So 1 in every 106 white males age 18 or older is incarcerated. 1 in every 36 Hispanic males age 18 or older is incarcerated. And 1 in every 15 black males age 18 or older is incarcerated. Alright, now you can do with that what you will, as they say. But let's keep going. And then I go into why do black people commit more crimes. And this is just studies that they've done. I'm not God, but this is what I came up with when I looked it up. So it says unmarried black mothers with children under 18 are the most impoverished demographic in American society. And they are the most common type of family structure in black communities, which is which is backed up by statistics. And the family structure is I feel like one of the biggest components of this, not just the poverty struck stuff, because money can make you go do bad things, but I feel like being alone can make you do worse. A lot of the problems I feel like are also connected to, I would say, gangs. And obviously when you think about the prison industry, there's a lot of people who are in gangs that were kind of trying to find that family unit in that and end up getting lost and stuck. But that's my personal opinion, and from what I know my whole life, I've known all my brothers and sisters, and I listen, and that's what I've retained also. Not just from that. But the next thing I got on here is the reasons why so many black people are in prison go well beyond profiling. And this is another one from the Huffington Post. It says, when we think of racial profiling, we generally think of a person of color, perhaps a black or Latino man or woman, in a car who gets stopped by police based on skin color. Often a minor traffic infraction, like failing to signal when charging lanes, provides the legal rationale for such stops, when in reality the stops are motivated by race. Now, I agree with that to a very big extent, but I also believe it's a lot of how we portray ourselves. Even though it's not fair, I feel like, obviously, if I go out and I have my grill on and I have my dreads, they're already looking at me. It is racist and it is stereotyping me, but I also understand that when I go outside. And every day I try to figure out a way to be a kind person and be friendly to everybody, so maybe I can work against that stereotype, because I'm not the type to change myself to appease to the general motion of others. But let's just keep going. Okay, now, a lot of people, I don't know how many people paid attention, but on July 30th, 2008, the United States House of Representatives passed a resolution apologizing for American slavery and subsequent discriminatory laws. God dang. In June 2009, the U.S. Senate passed a resolution apologizing to African Americans for the fundamental injustice, cruelty, brutality, and inhumanity of slavery. The news was welcomed by President Barack Obama, the nation's first president of African descent. Some of President Obama's ancestors may have been slave owners. Wow. Well, that was on, obviously, Wikipedia. That's funny how they ended with that, though. But I think that's a good thing they did that. But I think what would have been even better is if they changed the 13th Amendment as they were apologizing, because it's like, okay, well, we're sorry we had you as slaves. It still says on the 13th Amendment that you guys are slaves if you get in trouble, but our bad. Like, it would have been a simple change, personally, if you ask me. But then now we must ask, where is slavery when we look at the world today? Now, the most recent thing that came up when I put this, it said in 2014, for the first time in history, major leaders of many religions, Buddhist, Anglican, Catholic, Orthodox, Christian, Hindu, Jewish, and Muslim met to sign a shared commitment against modern-day slavery. The declaration they signed calls for the elimination of slavery and human trafficking by 2020. Now, a lot of people ain't gonna probably believe this, but yeah, people are still slaves today, and I think that just goes to show it wasn't that far ago. It wasn't that long ago, I guess I should say. And I think we need to understand where we came from so we can know where we're going, and understand the problem isn't over all around the world. In America, we aren't slaves with whips and stuff. We're slaves to money, but that's a whole nother thing, and slaves when we go to jail. But there is still slavery going on in this world, which shows it's not too far behind us. And as long as we continue to work forward and we stay a path as a community, I don't think nothing will bring us down, but we just got to keep on walking, like I always say. And I want to give a shout out to Ben and Jerry's, because for one, the ice cream is the junk, but then also for their post that they posted even before all this BLM movement and everything, this new one. So they posted this little image, and it says slavery 1619 to 1865.